Welcome to our October edition of our AI Ask Me Anythings. If you haven't been here before, we do this once a month at the end of the month, usually on Wednesdays, where we debrief everything that's been happening in the AI education ecosystem with a big focus of what's coming down the pipe from the AI world and hopefully translating that and pulling the signal from the noise around what's happening in AI and what that means for our education ecosystem. And today, a lot of announcements, especially coming from some of the bigger AI players and how that's shaping our internet, how we interact with each other, our social media landscape, the currency of the internet. So excited to chat about all of that. If you have any questions at all, please do add them to our Q&A section. We will be answering them at the end, and excited to just go through this with you all. As always, any feedback is appreciated. If there's any follow-up questions, please do include them. We'll be sure to address them in next month's debrief. So I'll pull up the presentation now. This should be an updated date. That's my bad. But we're doing October's. But if you want to catch September's, we do have that available online as well. So today I wanted to talk about a couple of big things, specifically around the recent drops of Atlas from OpenAI and the broader AI browser wars, what that means for this shift from SEO to GEO, from search engine optimization to generative engine optimization. Obviously, we have to talk about the launch of Sora 2. OpenAI launched an apps SDK. Claude also similarly launched another kind of agentic play around skills. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about whether or not we are in an AI bubble, which you can imagine there's a lot of discussion around, and wanted to bring up finally a breakthrough I feel is really important to highlight in the ecosystem. So first, with OpenAI releasing Atlas. If you've been tracking the browser wars, I've been talking a lot about this for a while now. There are a bunch of players like Dia, which was recently acquired by Atlassian for about 610 million. Perplexity has been building Comet. And then obviously Google has been trying to AIify Chrome for a while now. And all these browsers essentially merge a browser, a search engine, and an AI assistant in one single interface. It's basically a persistent companion or ChatGPT companion in split screen mode, and it's able to see what's on your screen. So instead of having to switch tabs or copy and paste, it can see what's on your screen and then respond contextually. It can also, based off that information, summarize a page, explain a chart, all without you having to leave the page. If you think about our traditional ways of interacting with AI chatbots, there's a lot of hand-holding. You have to copy and paste a lot of context. You're often switching between tabs. You might have to send documents just to give it that additional knowledge. Now, it's flipping that, and your AI system is coming to all that contextual layer. Atlas specifically is also agentic, so it's able to do things like fill out forms, book meetings, draft replies. It has actually memory, so it's able to see what you've done before. So for example, you could ask things like, what were the Halloween decorations I was looking at last week? Or what were the job postings I was also looking at? It is worth noting that all of these tasks are pretty constrained on session length, meaning that right now you can only really run tasks that are a few minutes long. So you can't really give it a task that is multi-hour, multi-step, and just let it run for a few hours. You still kind of have to handhold, but it's a lot more proactive on its own, as opposed to this very manual, here's a lot of information, do this task, instruction, instruction, instruction. So you can see the step change from AI moving from really an intern that you have to handhold through every single step. It's actually gaining some knowledge now, and it's coming to your workplace, gleaning context and acting on it. And at a high level, building a browser makes a ton of sense. It is the ultimate surface area. So the prize for OpenAI isn't necessarily just building a browser, even though that sounds like a great product and you get a ton of distribution. But really why they want to build a browser is because there's a massive context graph. A context graph basically makes it such that their AI systems are the most useful and personalized agents. You can see the huge difference of OpenAI knowing, okay, if you want a travel action done, I need as much context as possible. So there's a reason why they're bringing that intelligence into the places that you're working. And in that sense, I think what we're seeing is AI clearly becoming much more ambient. I think this is happening at the generalist layer, where instead of having separate AI apps, AI is just going to be embedded in the interfaces we already use. So you're not necessarily just going to go to ChatGPT or Gemini. It's really bringing ChatGPT and Gemini to the places you work. I do want to talk a little bit about the bad website paradox and how this is actually a pretty big shift, because for the majority of the internet today, the web was actually originally built for humans with eyes and who largely operate with clicks and keyboards and a mouse. So information is meant to be relayed to humans who are making decisions. And that means that information on the internet is largely unstructured. And that means it's inconsistent, it's semantically thin. And that means that it's not very easy for these models to technically parse, and it's largely unreadable. And so I think in response to this, what we'll see is that a lot of the web will want to be rebuilt to be machine readable. So even though AI systems can see things on your screen, it's still really hard for them to parse out certain things. And so I think in the same way that SEO and search engine optimization and Google taught everyone to optimize for showing up on Google, you'll have the same thing where developers and people will want to optimize for being visible to agents. And we have to recognize that these agents have preferences. I think I brought this up previously, but for example, if you ask Claude, where should I buy flowers, versus OpenAI, where should I buy flowers, Claude will route you to its default preference of 1-800-Flowers, versus OpenAI will route you to Bing's #1 result, which is interesting because it really demonstrates that these systems are routing people and their eyeballs to different landing or different destinations. And so if you are one of these destinations, if someone is asking, where should I learn about AI, or what school should I go to if I'm interested in an architecture major, now there's a lot of incentive to optimize your website and your information for generative engine optimization. And I think doubling down on this, because AI browsers are the main way that people access information, you might, even bypass websites entirely. There's fewer clicks, there's fewer traditional ads to reach eyeballs. And so in this sense, web analytics and SEO as we know it could completely break. And there might be a new model. I'll touch on that a little bit later around, this future of AI optimization and generative engine optimization. And finally, with the browsers, I did want to highlight, we are still super early with this. There are a ton of security implications. Specifically, these AI browsers are pretty vulnerable to something called prompt injection attacks. So these are basically hidden instructions that are embedded within web pages that can hijack a model and trick it into leaking data or running unintended actions. So you can have a page or an image even where it secretly instructs an agent to ignore the user's commands and send their calendar or email data to a link. And for example, Brave, they ran a test of Perplexity's comment browser. And what they found was that when they asked Perplexity comment to summarize a Reddit thread, it allowed embedded commands within the Reddit thread to open the user's Gmail and then even trigger a password recovery flow. So this becomes really important when, we are starting to embed agents and AI browsers when we're using our banking pages, our emails. There's a lot of sensitive information. So I think there's still a ton of open questions around needing these new security protocols, especially when we're still very early around this security question. If you're more curious about OpenAI's browser specifically, I do feel like this translates to generally where we're at with all the browsers. You can see a bunch of people tested different tasks, playing 2048, which is that tile game. People are scoring that at 7 out of 10. For example, identifying songs or creating a playlist. That's a task that it can do pretty easily. But then when you go all the way down to downloading Steam demos, which is, finding and installing a Mac demo, that's a much more complex task. And even on that scored 1 out of 10. So you can see the variability in the types of actions. A lot of the actions that Excel's at right now are relatively repeatable. And and ones that are not that long in session length versus downloading something is a multi-step, more complex task. But overall, the takeaway is that right now, these AI browsers are good at simple structured web tasks, but if they're complex or multi-step and need contextual persistence, that's when they fall through. And I think going back to what I was saying, I think this is really important for everyone who uses some form of the internet to surface their product or their offering or information. I think there is a fundamental change in how the internet and information spreads. So specifically, tying to the AI browsers, Wikipedia recently said that roughly for their human page views to Wikipedia, it dropped roughly 8% compared to the same period in 2024. And it sounds like not that big of a number, but for their global traffic and for kind of year 2 or year 3 of this ChatGPT moment, that's a pretty big drop. Initially, they actually thought traffic was spiking, but what they found was actually it was a lot of bots that were scraping content while pretending to be real users. And when they actually filtered out for the fake traffic, the reality was that fewer people were using Wikipedia. And the reason for that is because people are now relying on AI-powered search summaries to give you the answer without ever sending you the source. And again, as I mentioned, these AI overviews are doing the decision-making for you before maybe if someone search, where do I go for this university program? It might give you 10 blue links. Obviously, there were ways to financially prioritize your link through Google search ads, but they still got still got served multiple links. Now it's telling you the answer without really giving you the opportunity to see the full picture. So in that sense, it's interesting for especially someone like a Wikipedia, where their core data set is so important for AI models and really the backbone of search knowledge. But in many ways, it's now invisible. And if their data is powering so many LLMs and summaries, yet people aren't really visiting the site, there's a big sustainability question around who maintains the knowledge if the contributors of knowledge lose motivation to continue putting it out. So I think you're seeing this with, for example, Chegg, Q&A around homework help, traditional Q&A and information retrieval is that specifically we're already seeing the numbers plummet, where students used to go to a Chegg or somewhere else for homework help. Now they're going directly into AI overviews or ChatGPT. Similarly, you saw also similar findings from peer research that found that Google shows an AI overview summary most of the time, but only 8% of users click through to the actual websites. So that's a 50% drop in links. If you are a company or a product or a school that drives a lot of your top of funnel from eyeballs on the internet and search, this is something to watch. Specifically, anything where the question starts with who, what, when, why, Google will now actually trigger AI summaries 60% of the time. And users rarely click on sources. They say they'll source site sources, but apparently that based off their numbers, it just happens 1% of the visits. So I think what matters is that really the kind of the business model of the open web is kind of breaking. You kind of used to have free scraping in exchange for traffic and attribution. So you give content in exchange for Google surfacing people to you. But now that's completely changing. And that system changes because creators no longer have control and they lose incentive. And so Cloudflare is actually trying to do something about this space, where they recently quietly updated millions of websites robots.txt files, and they included new content signals. So basically, you can now embed metadata that declares whether a site's content can be used for traditional search, meaning you're good with indexing. You can declare if it's supposed to be used as real-time AI input, or you can declare whether it's supposed to be used to train AI models. And so hopefully this kind of lays a groundwork for a potential system where, you could even see a world where companies are licensing their data to AI companies, and AI companies pay for content access or training data. Or there might be, a new business model for creators that replaces this kind of old traffic for exposure covenant. Still on OpenAI just because there are so many launches, but they also launched Sora 2, so definitely want to talk about that. And as I mentioned in the beginning, if you have any questions at all, please do include them in the Q&A. We will have some time at the end to address them. Feel free to add them throughout the video as things come up. But specifically on Sora 2, basically what they launched was a new flagship video plus audio model. It's built, this is kind of the second iteration of Sora 1. But really the launch was big because they launched actually a platform around that, which is a social app that looks much more similar to like a TikTok, where you have a lot of short form content. The app also allows you to upload your face and your voice, so your likeness, and then you can actually appear in your friends' AI generated videos as cameos. And there's also remix features where users can build on each other's clips. So if I make a clip of Top Chef, then someone can remix it and add themselves as one of the chefs. And the videos were very viral. It quickly became one of the most downloaded apps. Honestly, even faster than ChatGPT, but building off of ChatGPT distribution. I think what's interesting is like if you really take a step back and look at how video models have evolved. I want to highlight the Will Smith eating spaghetti test, which is kind of this informal benchmark that a lot of people use to test how good video models are. And it's because in 2023, someone uploaded a video of what they called Will Smith eating spaghetti on Reddit. And obviously it was ridiculous. It was terrible. It did not look very realistic at all. You can see here his hands don't look like hands. His face, that does not look like Will Smith. And importantly, he isn't eating because properly, and it's not based off of real physics or real motion. And that was because largely before, or still, a lot of these models were built off of like word diffusion based. So they were starting with one pixel and then filling the blanks around it. So you can see how it gets to this, and like it's trying to make sense of what someone eating a spaghetti looks like, but it's not accurate. Fast forward to today, you have AI models that embed not only physics, motion, we've solved for the hand problem and the limbs problem, but they also have narrative understanding. So I can't play video on this platform, but the most recent one, this is from Google's VO 3.1 model. It captures his voice exactly like Will Smith's voice. You can hear him say that he loves this spaghetti. It looks like him, and there are no glitches like just 2 years ago. And from Sora 2, you're getting these cinematic quality videos. This again generated from one prompt. I wish I could show you the video, but there were a ton floating around. Cinematic quality 10-second video with just one prompt. You can, as I mentioned earlier, you can remix if things are going viral. Someone made a Top Chef alien version. You can see just with one prompt alone, they're not adding extra references. They're not teaching it extra. They're not giving it a script. They're just saying, I want you to, giving them 2-3 sentences and outputting essentially a high quality narrative video. And as I mentioned, you can add people who have allowed their cameos. So Sam Altman has allowed people to cameo him in their videos. And so now you can put Sam Altman in any clothing you want, and that's one single prompt. But it also means that you can create videos like this, where, this is a joke that Sam Altman was stealing GPUs because they're in such high demand. But you can kind of see where this goes, where people can create anything today. Like they can create a video of anyone creating a crime with one prompt. And there's largely not many guardrails around this today. A lot of it is unfolding in real time, where now Sora is clamping down a bit more on copyright. That's evolving. I think the safety piece is evolving. But if you are an institution or you're interfacing with institutions, there's a high likelihood that students or users are creating these videos. And I think what I worry about is without any digital literacy around AI and these tools, we default to the worst version of usage of these creativity tools. And I think just really a important data point to remember that we are reaching a point where there is no going back. Pandora's out of the box and people have these tools. So I think there needs to be strong literacy around what is AI or not, how to develop these, the guardrails around them, etc. I think around Sora 2 specifically, what's different is really that this is a engine with narrative understanding. So even with very vague prompts, it's able to embed the storytelling around it. That's kind of where the creativity gets injected from the AI, versus before you really had to do the work of really scripting out scene by scene, story by story. Now you just kind of give it a very vague prompt and it's able to build a story around that. And it can turn that abstract intent into structured scenes. It also, you produce consistent characters across shots, and this means that you can create polished ads, demos, motion heavy clips. The only thing though is that it can't script or extend clips beyond 10 seconds. So right now we're still early, but you can see a world where this extends into multi-hour long creations as well. I think one thing I'm still thinking a lot about is just, the exciting part where you are democratizing storytelling, where anyone can generate and create these cinematic scenes in just minutes. But I think there's a big cultural question around endless AI slop. And I actually think the pendulum will swing back to a lot more desire for human content and desire for the almost like the anti-AI platform. So I think that's something to watch too, is just in a world where there is endless AI slop, where value accrues, and kind of the flocking back to what's scarce, which is human outputted artisanal content. And maybe, there's this thirst for a system that not only is outputting true human content, but verifying that what's coming out of it is human generated. So it's interesting to think about, also I've been having discussions with folks around, in a world where AI slop is commoditized or AI content is commoditized, is that viewed as a lesser than product? Is human content then viewed as a luxury? And so there's questions around, do you want to position something as AI generated in a world where AI content is infinite and seen as cheap? So questions around that, it's all evolving in real time, but just something to think about. OpenAI also launched their apps SDK, which essentially is a move to turn turn ChatGPT into a platform and not just a chatbot. So they partnered with a lot of developers like Coursera, Canva, Zillow, Spotify, and you can basically build mini apps that live natively inside ChatGPT. So you can have your conversation as is, but when you say, help me study calculus, ChatGPT will tag the Coursera app and surface a calculus course, all without you leaving the chat. So instead of having to, again, switch between tabs or tools, you're staying inside ChatGPT, and then those partners plug in with their API integrations. Similar to how Facebook apps worked early on inside Facebook or, the broader App Store. This is important because, this really shows that OpenAI is trying to become the operating system for the web. And I'll speak a little bit more on it, but I also want to highlight the Coursera partnership specifically. I did have a conversation with Leah, the head of education at OpenAI, and Greg Hart, the CEO of Coursera, recently on all of this. So feel free to go look at that if you're interested in specifically in their partnership and what it means for both of them. But I think what we're seeing generally with this apps play is that, again, this is a platform play. They want to be the place that partners plug into and move their services into ChatGPT's conversational flow. I think this is important because they clearly want to own the distribution layer where all user interactions, whether that's searching, studying on Coursera, shopping on Etsy, working, creating playlists on Spotify, all that happens through ChatGPT. And so that gives OpenAI this leverage over attention. But also, I think what's important is that it basically allows them to understand the AI graph. So if you think about Facebook really building the social graph that maps how different people connect and the relationships between them, I actually think this is OpenAI's play to map the relationships between the different services and between intent, so asking for, give me a course, to data, to the actual tooling itself, and which apps help you accomplish those goals. That is very important data that doesn't exist. You can't just buy that data, right? To understand when people go from intent to the tools that they use, that is highly valuable. And so they're starting to build that by creating a platform. And whoever owns that intent to action graph actually controls this next generation of the internet experience. Obviously, once people start to do tasks within ChatGPT, that reinforces even more economic and behavioral lock-in. And then developers obviously get access to ChatGPT's 800 million weekly active users. So long-term, pretty similar to Apple's iOS ecosystem economics. For Coursera, I think what matters is that this essentially, it's exciting for them because they get access to those 800 million users. When someone asks a course-related question or a studying-related question, it gives Coursera exposure. So if you say, teach me linear algebra or explain what reinforcement learning is, ChatGPT can automatically pull Coursera in to deliver a preview of the course. So it's not delivering the course fully within ChatGPT, but it is kind of a top of funnel where they'll give you a preview of that course, and then you can go to take that full Coursera course on the Coursera platform. But I think the future is they'll probably embed quizzes in there, assessments, previews, other recommendations. So it's really contextual distribution at scale, which is much more valuable and organic than just a search ad, right? You are literally targeting the user with their exact request, their exact intent. And so I think it's really shifting from just search to intent-driven discovery. I do think it'll be interesting. Greg and Leo haven't or didn't really share much, but I think what I'm curious to see from OpenAI is broadly what this means for the conversion funnel and the economics of funneling people to these platforms. Is it a finder's fee? Is it a rev share when a user converts into a Coursera plan? I'm curious how that plays out. I also think there's a lot of platform dependency risk. So if ChatGPT becomes the front page of the web, does that mean that people are not going to find courses that are not partners of Coursera, partners of ChatGPT? So there's massive exposure, but potentially a lot of algorithmic dependence. And I'm curious, especially what happens when eventually, a Udemy or a Skillshare, another major course platform, also wants to get those eyeballs. How do you know who to route to when they all offer the same great course? And I think it'll probably play out the way that Google does, Google search does, but something to watch in this space. Another big release worth watching if you're in the developer space, or just generally if you're in enterprise, is Claude Skills, which are basically these mini knowledge packs or instructions that you can give to Anthropic's Claude to make it better at specific tasks. So each skill is actually a folder where you have scripts, instructions, resources. You can add brand guides, spreadsheet templates, code snippets. And then instead of typing out everything you want every single time, like copying and pasting a prompt, you basically just load in a skill that brings all that context. And when a skill is loaded, Claude becomes contextually trained on that task, whether that's your marketing copy or in your company's tone or cleaning Excel data. And basically, it's different from just a prompt because a prompt is usually one time and it disappears after the conversation. A skill, on the other hand, is persistent and reusable and structured. So users on their own can create skills, but you can also use them across Claude AI, Claude Code, their API, the agent SDK. And this is really important as we move to more and more agents. I think the difference between chatbots that you need to prompt and handhold versus an agent that understands context and understands workflow. So OpenAI is solving for this by building their browser. Claude is embedding skills. This idea that you don't have to re-explain what you're doing every single time. And instead, you just load in a skill. I'm curious also to see if there will be kind of company-specific plugins too. But yeah, a highly evolving, a space that's evolving very quickly. I think this is interesting because it also plays into Anthropic's dominance in the enterprise space. And when it comes to consumer, I would say ChatGPT has a lot of the mind share. But for enterprise, I think recently, even today, there was a graph showing that Anthropic has overtaken OpenAI in enterprise adoption. So you can see how companies like Box or Rakuten or Canva might deploy skills to automate their workflows. And so if you're building with Claude, this is probably a good hack. So instead of having to teach the AI or API, same things over and over again, you can just embed your company tone, formats, data structures. And then finally, I wanted to touch on this big question that I've gotten a ton around whether or not we are in an AI bubble, which if you haven't seen this chart from Bloomberg, it shows a lot of the financial round tripping happening inside the AI world, where a lot of the money is flying between the same 10 companies. And for a lot of people, they're saying that it's starting to look a little bubbly in behavior. And I kind of wanted to explain at a high level what that was, because I know there are a lot of companies in the space. It's confusing who's funneling money into who, why the same dollars are bouncing around. Specifically, I think people are focused on this core loop where you have OpenAI, which we know one of the biggest builders and spenders in AI. They make ChatGPT and a bunch of models like Sora or other GPT models. So they need a ton of massive computing power. They need a ton of computing power. And because of that, they buy billions of dollars in GPUs from NVIDIA. And NVIDIA here, they make all the chips. But recently, NVIDIA agreed to invest up to $100 billion back into OpenAI itself. At the same time, OpenAI is spending about $300 billion on cloud infrastructure of Oracle. And you can kind of think of them as the landlord here. They're renting out data center real estate. However, those data centers also run on NVIDIA chips. So you kind of see how this funnel flows in a very circular manner. At the same time, you also have a lot of other players. I'm not going to go too deeply into all of them, but you, for example, have CoreWeave, which is basically a intermediary or middleman that acts between NVIDIA and OpenAI. CoreWeave basically is like an AI version of AWS or Google Cloud that rents GPU capacity, or they rent GPU capacity off of NVIDIA. So NVIDIA actually owns about 7% of CoreWeave, but they also buy about $6 billion of cloud capacity from them. And then you have AMD, which AMD's NVIDIA's main rival. OpenAI has about a 10% ownership, or OpenAI recently launched a multi-billion-dollar partnership with them, and in return, AMD can give them the option to buy shares. So you see how OpenAI is both a customer and a shareholder here. XAI, another example. And then this is the very zoomed out version, and I won't go too deeply into all of this in the interest of time, but you're seeing this play out even at the big tech and government level. So Microsoft is OpenAI's biggest backer. However, they invested billions in OpenAI. They host ChatGPT on Azure. Amazon and Google are doing the same with Anthropic. They invested in Anthropic, but they also host it on AWS and Google Cloud, but they also buy the same NVIDIA chips underneath. So again, a lot of money flowing in between the same players. Even Intel is in here, and the US government now has a 10% stake via the CHIPS Act. So what you're seeing is what a lot of people are calling this financial AI Ouroboros, where you could say it's a virtuous cycle in traditional vendor financing, but others are calling it what it looks like, which is a lot of buying from each other, and some are saying that just to keep the hype alive. But it is an interesting look at how the infrastructure level AI money machine keeps running. Obviously, not many edtech companies are playing here, but as we think about the broader AI space, the hype around it, the money flowing into it, it's important to recognize that this is definitely a conversation on many people's minds right now. And then finally, I wanted to end on a very positive note that despite concerns around and a lot of unanswered questions around AI slop and AI literacy and the AI bubble, we did have a really cool breakthrough that happened this month. Basically, Google DeepMind and Yale researchers used a 27 billion parameter AI model to help discover a new potential cancer therapy pathway. This is important because a lot of people think that AI systems just summarize and repackage what already exists. But this is actually an example of AI generating original scientific knowledge. So what it was able to do, they basically gave the model a challenge to find a drug that could help the immune system identify tumors that normally hide from detection. Basically, this is a big problem where you have cold tumors and your immune system isn't able to attack them. So you need a drug that can turn them hot, but you don't want to overactivate an immune response. And so the Yale researchers alongside DeepMind ran a virtual screen of 4,000 drugs. And what they found was this little known drug called, I'm not going to mispronounce it, but silmetacertib could act as a conditional amplifier. Basically would only boost the immune signal when it was already faintly active, but it wouldn't over trigger and do anything otherwise. Which this is important again, because this had never been made. This prediction had never been made before at all. It wasn't in any other scientific papers. It wasn't a previous hypothesis. This was a completely new idea. And it worked. When they tested it in tumor cells, they actually saw that that small drug was able to turn cold tumors hot. So did AI solve cancer overnight? No, but I think what is exciting is that, you know, as much as there's a lot evolving in the space and both good and bad, I also think hopefully we are delivering on some of the promises of this AI revolution in science and research, in healthcare, where you can really see step changes in using these systems to really accelerate progress and science and discovery. And despite a lot of cynicism around AI's impact, I think when AI is directed at some of the hardest problems in energy or medicine, it is a pretty exciting time that we live in, and hopefully we see more of these. So I know we are coming up at time. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to include them in the chat. If not, I will look at them later and we will definitely address them at our next Ask Me Anything. But hopefully this is helpful, and stay tuned for next month. It's typically, you know, next November, the last Wednesday of next November. So appreciate all listening to me. And if you have any thoughts, feedback, ideas you want to share, let me know. My email is just claire@gsv.com.